Good morning, everyone. We are sorry for the little delay. A very warm welcome to everyone. My name is Indu Khurana, and I'm the chair of the Teaching Committee Entrepreneurship Division at the Academy of Management. And this event is hosted by the Teaching Committee for the Entrepreneurship Division. And this is our first session for the academic year. And earlier this spring, we held like two fantastic sessions. And if you missed those, you can find them on our YouTube channel. We'll post the link in chat. And a few housekeeping rules. Please stay muted during the session to avoid any background noise. And we'll have a question and answer session at the end. Please feel free to jot down your questions or post them on chat. We will monitor it. I am absolutely delighted to introduce our speaker today, though technically she does not need any introduction. I mean, she's a superstar. We are honored to be joined by Professor Sarasvathy here, the Paul Hammaker Professor of Business Administration at the Darden School of Business. She is internationally renowned for her pioneering work on effectuation, a transformative theory of entrepreneurial decision making that has reshaped both research and teaching in the field of entrepreneurship. Today, we are honored to have her, and she'll start by giving a brief introductions to the foundations of effectuation. Then she'll share insights from her two recent and impactful publications. One which will offer a framework of choosing entrepreneurship tools, and another one will be about universal entrepreneurship education in Denmark. Please welcome Professor Saraswati here. We are so excited to have you, Saras, today.
Likewise, Indu, I'm wondering why did we not do this before? Is this something new that the AOM teaching committee is doing? However it is, I'm just glad to be here. I'm glad you invited me, and I apologize for some of the technical difficulties. And people who are clapping and thumbs up and everything, just hold on. Let me earn it, huh? So just delighted to be here. Uh, so I am going to share a Prezi as we move forward. And I would like, I mean, maybe the first 10 minutes or so, while I introduce things, we don't need Q&A, but you can put in things in chat along the way. And Indu, if you see something that's interesting or relevant, just feel free to interrupt because we are all, scholars and educators here. And so if the more we make it like a conversation, the better, I think. But I did get excited and prepared some slides, so let me share that here. Give me 1 second. Um, so as I said, because I had to reboot everything, it'll just take me a second to bring this up. And also, working on a laptop is getting harder as the years go by. Um, uh, okay, hold on. Let's present this, please. Oh no. Okay, it's coming up. And then meanwhile, I will share. Make sure in case we need to go there. Okay, here we go. So can everybody see the presentation? Let me bring you all back as video panel. Okay, Indu and Tina, I can see you. So let me hit present here. Give me 1 second. All right. So I hope everybody can see the presentation fully. If not, Indu, let me know, okay? So I'm presenting the cave framework, so I thought we should have a cave in the background. So here we go. So I'm going to assume that maybe people know a thing or two about the work on effectuation, but just want to remind you that people give me all kinds of credit for all kinds of things other people do, and I'm very grateful for all the work that has been done over the last 25 years. But I just want to remind everybody that the AMR paper, the theory paper, gives the impression that I just came up with a theory like in the bathtub or something. But actually, it comes from the lived experiences of expert entrepreneurs. And the original study involved a cognitive science-based study of expert entrepreneurs. That's just a reminder, but let's jump into it because this is the teaching thing. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the research. So the idea is traditionally we think about the better we can predict, the better we can control, right? It's like a linear relationship that comes from science. But what the expert entrepreneurs learn is that you can separate prediction and control. That immediately gives us the space of different levels of predictability and different levels of things that we have within our control. And that then gives like four quadrants. And actually, my students came up with a name CAVE, which is causal, adaptive, visionary, effectual, right? So you can see that. And since this is a teaching focused talk, let's just begin with the simplest way of a student saying, you know what, I think I may have an idea, or I don't even have an idea. I would like to be an entrepreneur, whatever, but I don't know what to do. If you look at it very quickly, just by looking at this two by two, we can come up with different attitudes and different sets of actions and techniques, right? So, for example, uh, but this is all the stuff that's happened in the last 25 years kept me busy. As you can see, research books, textbooks, and the latest one is the Cambridge Element. So it's 25. I mean, from the paper publishing itself is going to be 25 years next year, but I've been working at it longer than that. So clearly there was enough there to keep me busy and hundreds of other people busy too. So I'm very grateful on that front. So here we go. So if we take the four quadrants and ask ourselves this question of, I don't know what to do. So here are the kinds of answers we can give. So before the research from Effectuation started coming out, the focus was on market research and business planning and analyzing and forecasting. So captured in this one word, plan, right? And then because of technology and all the pace of technology heating up and everything, people started looking at Silicon Valley and got this idea of agility. And we have to change all the time because the world changes all the time. So low in prediction, low in control is the adaptive quadrant, where you think about pivoting as the primary word there. But of course, the holy grail for everybody is I want to be able to predict the future, and I want to be able to have everything within my control that can allow me to take advantage of my prediction. This is sort of a fantasy quadrant, although you can sort of move in and out once in a while, but yet we still continue to teach the pitch, right? The idea that we come up with a vision of what we are going to do, how big the market is, and then what are the resources we need, who has which resources, and then we decide what the deal structure of what we will offer them, and then we're going to pitch them, right? And we get them on board. This is still the focus of almost all entrepreneurship courses. But then the thing that we do not do enough of, the thing that I've spent the last 10, 15 years working on based on effectuation, but also thinking larger, is really this idea of partnering or co-creation. So let's jump in. What is there in the effectual quadrant? And this is again a very quick review. So what we're going to look at are the 5 principles and the process very quickly. So the first thing I want you to remember is every principle in effectuation is low on prediction and high on control. And you might wonder, what the heck does it mean? How can I control something I cannot predict? The way you want to think about it is not control as an outcome, but control as strategy, right? You're always looking at what is within my control, what's not within my control, what's within our control, who wants to work with us, and who do we want to work with. And you're always working with things within your control. So control becomes strategy, and that leads to our control over outcomes as well. So let's look at the 5 principles. So remember, each one is low in prediction, high in control. So we start with the bird in hand principle. So you are dividing the world into things within your control and things outside your control. What do you do with the things outside your control? Well, you ignore them. You just look at what is within your control, your bird in hand, the means already available to you. And then you say, what kinds of effects can I create based on the means already available? Hence the name effectual, right? Because traditionally we start with a goal or we start with an effect and we say, how can I, all the different ways that I can achieve this goal or effect. Now here the expert entrepreneurs are saying, no, look around you, look at the means already on hand and say, what kind of goals, what kinds of effects can I create based on my means? So then let's say you start with that, and I want you to know that the five principles can be mixed and matched in many different ways. Just in terms of telling a story and giving a talk, the order helps. So I put it in this order. So you start with your bird in hand, and what do you do about risk? When you take a look at that, the traditional way we think about risk is we project future cash flows, and then we also project future risk, and then we try to think about the risk adjusted cash flow, right? So we calculate expected return. Whereas these expert entrepreneurs are saying, no, let's just keep the downside within our control. What am I willing and able and to afford to lose in order to do this? And the really expert entrepreneurs will tell you everybody can afford to lose zero, right? Maybe the only thing you really need to invest is time and your mind space. So you can start with zero, or you can say, I have some other thing, have a little bit of savings or whatever. But the idea is you're keeping the downside within your control, and you're doing the creating the kinds of effects that you can create for affordable loss. But affordable loss does something more interesting as well. In addition to keeping the downside within your control, it also gets you to think about your upside very differently, because now you have to answer the question, would I want to do this even if I lose things that I am willing to invest into this? And so that does change the upside as well. So this is an interesting conversation you can have with students. And then in terms of dealing with competition and dealing with targeted stakeholders, effectuation inverts that principle as well, right? So the effectual entrepreneurs will talk to anybody and everybody and think about who wants to self-select in, hence the crazy quilt, right? So they're not saying I need X, Y, and Z, because they're not tying themselves to the goal. So they don't say, I need X, Y, and Z. Who has X, Y, and Z? And now I have to convince them to give me the resources. That's not the way they proceed. And so, or they're not looking at all the competition and choosing a market based on, Porter's framework, five forces, or anything like that. They're really just saying, what can I get done for my affordable loss? And who would want to work with me? So that's why it's a crazy quilt, because whoever comes on board, you're willing to work with. And this one inverts the idea of partnerships, of competitors. So even with your competitors, you're always looking to partner and create a bunch of very unexpected self-selected stakeholders here. But along the way, of course, things outside your control will still hit you. So when life, throws lemons at you, you make lemonade. So you start embracing contingencies rather than avoiding them. And the most important lesson, and this is the whole logic behind effectuation, is the idea that the future is not given. It's not out there. It's not a navigation problem, right? You're not trying to find an opportunity. You're going to work with people who want to work with you, and you're going to shape and influence, and you're actually end up creating. So when you look at history, history does not run on autopilot, is the lesson they learn, that in some ways we co-create history, and every single person on this historical plane that we have is actually a pilot. There are no passengers. We all get to shape the future. So that is those are the five principles. And now let's take a look at how they work together dynamically over time. So let's look at a process view of the same five principles, but we put them into motion here. So when we look at that, think about this now time wise, right? Day one, you can ask yourself, who am I? What do I know and whom do I know, right? Those are your birds in hand. You don't even have to worry about what do I have if you won't had that, because in the original study the expert entrepreneurs only use these three categories: who am I, what do I know, and whom do I know. And then you ask, what can I do? So, given who I am, what I know, and whom I know, what can I do? The focus is on what can I do, not what should I do. And as you can see, both of these things you can do day one. I tell my students all the time, right? This is day one exercise for you. Tomorrow morning, you wake up. What are you doing? You start interacting with other people. You talk to anybody and everybody. Some of them might be targeted because you think you have to, this is your customer and your, but be sure to be open and talk to many more people than you think are the stakeholders for your venture. So you start interacting with people. So effectually, when you interact with people, what are you doing? Uh, Usually, we give advice to students to go ask for advice and feedback and information. Maybe seek some help in building a website or something like that. But the real thing that effectual entrepreneurs focus on in every conversation is trying to get to a commitment. So the key driver of the entire process of effectuation are these conversations with people who end up committing something real to the venture, right? Because when somebody commits something, you're not predicting the future anymore. You're not just gathering information from a bunch of stakeholders and trying to analyze and you predict what the product should look like, or the customer predicts what they think they will want, a year from now or whatever. You don't want that. You actually want to work with people who are making real commitments, and the commitments drive the process. And this is how the commitments drive. Every single time you get a commitment, and these can be very small commitments, it can be as simple as, I know somebody who can build a prototype for you. Let me introduce you to that person or to that factory or something like that. It can be a small commitment, but it's a real commitment. The moment you have a real commitment from someone, you have new means, and that sets in motion this cycle of co-created resources, right? So even the bird in hand now becomes who we are, what we know, and whom we know. It's expanding already. But when you have good stakeholders coming on board who really are making commitments to your venture, they are usually they're not followers of your vision, right? A lot of them have their own vision of your idea or your competences or why they may be interested in working with you, things like that. So that starts changing and reshaping your goals in some ways. And that sets in motion a converging cycle of co-created constraints, because every time you make a commitment, then you have to deliver on that commitment, right? So there is also this converging cycle. They can go on at the same time. But while all of this is happening, the world is not sitting around doing nothing. It throws surprises at you, positive, negative, and all kinds of confusing surprises. And those surprises end up changing your bird in hand and your affordable loss as well. So you can see there are two sets of things that are beginning to change your bird in hand and your affordable loss. And then you continue interacting with people. And as you do that over a period of time, the process itself takes you not just to new business models or new customer segments or things like that, but to new ventures, new markets, and altogether new futures can happen. And the interesting thing here, remember, it's all non-predictive. So nobody in this process might have predicted what the new future will end up being. But here is the fun part of it. That non-predictive nature of the effectual process has a very important implication for performance. And here is how you want to think about it, right? Because of the surprises becoming a part of this and all these unexpected stakeholders, what happens is whenever success happens, if success happens, innovation just comes along for the ride. Innovation becomes much more likely when you build a venture effectually than if you build it using any of the techniques in any of the other three quadrants. Similarly, on the downside, what happens is if failure happens, oops, if failure happens, the costs of failures are lower. It's not about probability of success or probability of failure. That's too thin, right? It's a much deeper impact on performance. So if failure occurs, nobody loses more than they can afford to lose. And if success happens, success is likely to be much larger because innovation comes along for the ride. Okay, so I want to leave this up here for a minute, take one or two questions and do, and then I'll get into the practice of how our students or novice entrepreneurs, how they can practice their way into this process. So that's what I'll tackle next. And then we'll spend a little bit more time on the cave framework again. All right, so let me stop here for a second, take maybe one or two questions, if that's okay with you, Indu.
Sure. I think, Saras, we have one question. Uh, Kudicia, do you mind unmuting? You can ask the question directly if you want.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Okay,
Sanjeev.
okay, thank you. I'm Kutsia Munir. Um, and
Okay.
that crazy quilt gave me the vibes of strong and weak ties, governor theory about connections and networking. So, if I'm not wrong, so what
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. What theory? Sorry.
Granovetter
Oh,
theory of
Granovetter's
networking.
theory. Yeah. Okay.
So the crazy quilt gave me the vibes that strong and weak ties do figure in this whole thing that you have shown. So what is your take on it? I
Yeah.
mean,
Sure,
like accessing
surely
the
all network theories will work with the effectual process, right? And Granovetter's famous paper on strength of weak ties will work as well. But here is the interesting thing: effectuation adds to a lot of network theories. In what way? Because it shows you the dynamics. It shows you how you can, maybe you have very few ties. You're a poor illiterate woman in Bangladesh or Rwanda or something, right? You have very few. You forget strong ties and weak ties. You have very few ties, right? And but here it shows you how you can increase it by simply just talking to people and listening to them and figuring out ways to bring them on board. So, the dynamics of networks is what effectuation brings to the table, no matter which network theory you want to use and build on. So, networks are not just the structural thing, networks also evolve, and you can literally see it in this diagram, right?
just last question. How do you translate them into stakeholder commitments? I mean, not everybody can do it. Of course, as you said, that especially calling for gender perspective, women have the disadvantage in networking altogether. So,
Okay.
to convert that into stakeholder commitment that is really conducive and really solid for the women,
Okay.
especially, I mean, it can.
Okay. So you are an educator, I'm assuming. You never, ever want to start by saying, not everybody can do it. If you truly believe that, get out of the educator business. That's the first thing I will tell you.
Okay,
Because we
sorry,
want to
I'm not.
approach the world. No, no, we want to approach the world as it's not a question of whether everybody can do everything, right? I'm not saying that either. What I'm saying is entrepreneurship is very fundamental. The issue really is given who you are, right? Given all the things, that positive things and negative things that you have, what are some things you can do? So I'm going to answer your question directly as well, which is we want to say, okay, let's think about who you are. Who are three people that you're likely to meet tomorrow, Okay, that's the first step. And in your normal life, you don't have to go extra out of the way. We are not asking you to go talk to people you don't know. You just talk with people you know or people you meet for whatever reason. Maybe you are, you're going. Let's just stick with the poor illiterate woman in Bangladesh. Maybe you have some agricultural products and you're just going to go to the farmers market to sell. You're going to meet people, right, that you do not know there. And the idea here is, instead of just simply very nervously, putting up your tomatoes for sale or something, you actually engage in conversation with them. And let me tell you, a lot of these people are very, very good in engaging in conversation with anybody and everybody. They are survivors, right? So, but you can also think about, slightly more educated people, maybe students in your class or in my class, and they may just be shy, or they may find it very difficult to just make the ask from someone. All of those things are possible. All you're going to do is to work with your strengths, and you actually try to talk to somebody. And when you're talking to somebody, you're not trying to pitch them, you're not doing anything. You're just simply telling them things like, hey, this is what I'm working on. I think this will work. What do you think? Right? And then so that starts on some kind of advice or feedback mode. And then when the other person starts saying something, they could say many things. They could say, oh, I wouldn't do it this way, or why are you doing that? That does not make any sense. You get all these conversations, or somebody will say, oh, that is interesting. Have you thought of this? Right? You have this sort of conversation. And the moment somebody says, like, have you thought of doing it this way? And I always give the example of my pen and say, have you thought of making it of a different material or a different color or something? The difference is, you don't just simply think, oh, this is advice and I have to think about color now, all right, I have to think about material. Instead, you will ask them, what is it worth to you to come make it a different color with me? Or why are you thinking of a different material? Do you know people who can make a prototype? So all you're really doing is inviting them in, which is a very natural human way of having conversations. But the idea is to get them to do something with you. As I said, it can be as simple as they say, oh, I know this other person who makes things from metal, not from plastic. And then you say, hey, can you introduce me? Maybe you and I can go talk to them. Would you be interested? It's that kind of conversation. So we're not asking anybody for $2 million, right? We are asking, what is within their bird in hand? What is within their network? We are learning through conversation, and then we are asking them to do some action on our behalf. That's what the commitments are about. Because mentally we have this thing in mind where you're going to write a business plan and go raise $2 million or whatever, we think it's very, very hard. It's not at all hard. It's just the question of getting into the practice of moving the conversation beyond just advice and feedback to something that is within the bird in hand and within the affordable loss of that other person to do with you. That is the trick. That is the art. That's why I'm going to spend a couple more slides to show you how the effectual ask works in these conversations. I hope I've answered your question. It's not the hard pitch asking for big commitments. It is this co-creational ask where you are listening and looking for the other person's bird in hand, the other person's affordable loss. So it's impossible for them to say no. So if somebody says, I have no time to, look at your thing in detail and give you feedback, you ask them, what do you have time for then? Can I, or maybe, you have an assistant that I can talk with who will give me an hour of their time. So you're always pushing on what is within the other person's bird in hand, other person's affordable loss. So I hope I answered that question to some satisfaction. But in the interest of time, maybe I will take two more questions. And if you have more questions, here's my offer to you. Please email and ask more questions if you have. And this is an offer to everybody. So Sanjeev, you had your hand up for a while. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, Professor, thank you so much. My question was, you talked about the crazy quilt and the pilot in the plane. Is it not what, Y Combinator of the world is helping the entrepreneurs achieve? platforms where people can come together, co-create, rethink, redesign, and create a better opportunity to the initial idea. So that was question number one. And the question number two is, with AI advancing in the way it is, I was wondering where does AI fit into it? Will it come in the crazy quilt itself? How do you see AI converging or adding that value when it comes to the progress from the bird in hand to the final convergence?
Okay. Let me take the first one. Absolutely. Y Combinator especially does a few more things effectually than many other incubators and accelerators that are out there. Most accelerators are trying to get you to network with targeted stakeholders. Y Combinator does a little bit better and get in what I call shoe leather networking, where you talk to anybody and everybody. Paul Graham, especially one of the original co-founders of Y Combinator, is very, very effectual. If you look at his blog, every blog has, you can literally use, I think, Paul's blogs to teach effectuation for the most part. I assign do things that don't scale. I definitely assign that one to my students, because that clearly lays out, you can literally trace all the effectual principles and the process for sure. But still, let's remember that most entrepreneurs, right? I mean, like 99.99999% are never going to get into an incubator or accelerator. And we want to teach all kinds of businesses, because they are the backbone for the few ones that we keep talking about that comes out of Y Combinator or something like that. So huge fan of what incubators and accelerators do. But as educators, I think we have to think way bigger than any, and I would work to build some of the incubators and accelerators as well. But we do want to teach people they can do this on their own too, right? They can literally learn from you and from me and start building this
Right,
process. And maybe through the
right,
process, they'll end up building some accelerators too. So,
right,
so that's one thing. Now, with regard to AI, for the moment, at least, the way I look at it is AI is a tool like any other tool. The fact remains, you still have to get real customers paying real money. You have to have real employees who need to get a salary. You need real investors, right? You need need real suppliers making real things. We still need to eat food, right? So we don't
right,
want to be replace. I mean, AI is not going to replace anything in the crazy quilt process. It's still about meeting people and actually not only making the commitment, but structuring the deal, managing the relationship over time, and all of those things. But AI is a fantastic tool on, for example, thinking through stakeholders that you might otherwise not reach, right? So if you're the kind of person who has a technical background and can use AI, you can. Plus,
right,
even if you are not, nowadays there are AI tools that are available, say, for farmers and small holding for farmers in developing countries. So the tool is going to only make entrepreneurship more of a real possibility for more people in the world. On the
right,
flip side of it, AI is also going to put a certain number of people out of business, who then have to come and learn how to do the crazy quill, how to do the effectual process, and take courses. So the entire the idea of entrepreneurship is the ultimate backup option, both for the really poor who don't have access and for people who are going to get downsized one way or the other. It's just the ultimate backup option for everybody, and it is always an option for people who have all kinds of resources available to them. So that's the way we want to think about entrepreneurship. So
right,
I wouldn't worry too much about AI. We can have some other time, we can have a conversation on just the
right,
role of AI in business, but that's a topic for another day, I think.
right. Thank you so much, Professor. I really appreciate it.
Okay, given these questions, Indu, I'm going to trust your judgment. Should I take the next question? I have just one more hand, or should I proceed with the presentation?
How about we proceed and then take questions at the
Yeah.
end? We have
And
two
then we'll
more
come back to
minutes.
you, Yon, right? That's a Brazilian name, isn't it? Yes.
That's correct.
So if you can be patient, we'll come back to you. Okay, here we go. So let's think about it from a teaching perspective. We can teach the principles, we can teach the process, but practically on a daily basis, I like my students to really start thinking about uncertainty and see where uncertainty is and where uncertainty is likely to be. And then, given the in thinking about uncertainty, always think in terms of actions, right? Think what is doable today, immediately, right? Focus on action, focus on doing the doable. And then, in doing the, even if you're not actually building the venture, it's fine. Imagine a venture that you can build, but you're not imagining some fantasy venture, an AI app, and you have no AI coding skills. That's not what I'm thinking. You really want to think about what is it that I can do given who I am, what I know, and whom I know. And whatever I come up with is going to be filled with uncertainty, but I can still take some action right away. And then the one of the most important actions you can take is talking to people, right? So start practicing the effectual ask. And this doesn't even have to be like venture driven, right? I would tell people this weekend, you're going for a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Think about how can you get that a barista in Starbucks to give you 50 cents off of your whatever complicated coffee drink you're going to order from them, right? So the idea here is, what have you got to lose by just asking them, hey, what do I need to do to get 50 cents off of my coffee? Right. And then you push yourself a little bit more, right? Next time you're on a plane, talk to the person sitting next to you and say, hey, I'm thinking of starting a venture. What would it take for you to invest $100,000 or whatever it is? Take a guess, start a conversation, learn something about their bird in hand and affordable loss, and make an ask within their bird in hand and affordable loss, right? So you can try this all the time. You don't even have to start a venture to do this. And I'll show you, because I've been working on some research and looking at things on how just practicing the effectual ask can get you up the curve from being a novice entrepreneur to becoming an effectual entrepreneur without any constraints on what kind of ventures you're involved in. You could even be somebody working in a larger company or in the government, or you could be doing a social venture, all of those things. So here is the thing. I've just finished a book on this, but this is just a very, very, very quick, like an intro, if you will. So here's how you want to think about it. Like traditionally in the expertise literature, we have this idea of you start out as a novice, then you become an initiate, then you become an apprentice and a journeyman, and eventually you become an expert. So if you map this on and just really look at what happens just in the effectual ask, right? So you start with you know, you start with any kind of ask. It doesn't matter. You're asking for information, maybe, or you're just asking in the simplest way. Ask who you know. Would you be willing to? It's that kind of ask. And then you can learn a little bit and now start targeting people. Maybe you're looking for a job and you want a particular job or something like that. And then you start telling them, hey, I would love to come work for your company. Here's why you should hire me, that kind of thing. And then you start thinking about deals, like what do I need to do? Like, how do I get you on board to do something with me? Whether it's in a venture or whether it's in your career or in your life. And eventually you graduate, if you will, as you practice, you will even stumble upon it, but we can teach students to do this. The real effectual ask takes this kind of a shape. What would it take for you to? Because you're not asking them for X, Y, and Z. You're asking them for a relationship, right? So you're asking them, what would you, and you're really making it not a yes or no question, or here is why you should question. You're making it a question where you are opening the door and they can select in on their terms, and then you can decide whether you want to work with them or not. So here is how it translates into the CAVE framework, right? So these are the 4 kinds. And remember, the actual wording is not the important point. It's the whole frame you want to think about it. Would you please is the novice frame. And quid pro quo is the causal frame, that is what goes into a business plan and to a pitch. Why you should is a pitch, right? And pitch is just one kind of ask. But the expert entrepreneurs, the way they frame it is, what would it take? What do I need to do to get you on board? Literally, you're asking them to tell you what your pitch should be, right? Or you can say, how can I make this a big win for you? So it's always about the ask E, and you're opening the door and you are allowing them to come in. So this is one set of things that, around which we have been creating teaching materials and things like that that you can look at as well. But this is, and it helps you climb, so you can create a whole course along that line as well. Having said that, maybe we can go to there. How do you say your first name? I should know how to say your first name.
My name?
How do you say your first name?
It's João.
João. Okay, João.
Yes, it's a tricky Brazilian
very
name.
Portuguese. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Thanks, Dr. Sarasvathy, for the presentation. It's very, very important and very useful. I think that the last picture that you had with all the principles together.
Yeah.
Something that I've been reading and trying to come up with an explanation is, I think sometimes the entrepreneurship literature and the strategic management literature, they tend to work in different groups.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about specifically on one of the last principles that you had yes, this one.
Yeah.
You had the stakeholder commitments right there. So sometimes it's we talk to the students that, you know, they're starting their businesses, they're bringing their ideas together and so forth, but they are not working by themselves all the times. They are working with different groups of people, with different stakeholders, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about do you think it's possible to combine effectuation with this more stakeholder heavy approach, in the sense that what matters and who matters is not only the person that comes up with the idea or the owner, but also all the other parts and all the other groups and all the other people, or the so-called stakeholders, that also have a say in the organization, in the firm, because they also create value, and because they also take value out of the total amount that is created by the organization.
Yeah, I'm not sure why you even asked the question, because it's all about that in Effectuation, right? It's only day one that it is about who I am. Even that can be 2 co-founders or things, right?
Right.
Day 2, you already have other people. You can see it from the diagram, right? So, and it's not so-called stakeholders. They have to be real stakeholders. Anybody who invests even their mind or their connections with you, it still has a stake in your. They mean well for you, right? So absolutely, it's stakeholders and relationships all the way. So I'm not sure what the question is. Of course, nobody can build a venture alone anyway, even if you're building it causally, or even if you're a visionary. Even Steve Jobs had 2 co-founders day one, right? And many other people that you have to bring on board. That's just a fact. And this is exactly why we need to be teaching a lot more on the interaction front rather than the idea front, right? We spend too much time on idea and a bunch of time on like analysis, and then we never get to action. It's as though someday when some investor writes you a check, that's when you will act. That is not how the world works. Everybody knows that. So this one is not even a question. This is just a way of saying, yes, I agree with you, and I agree with you too. All right, excellent.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions? Because then I am happy to go back to the K framework in a little bit more depth.
Howard Haynes has a question. Howard, do you want to ask your question?
Sure thing. So my question comes, I guess, trying to understand, at least in your work, or that you've observed, that affordable loss principle. Do the effectual entrepreneurs really understand, or how do they deal with the psychological cost of failure?
So when you say the psychological cost of failure, there is some assumptions there. So let's unpack that a little bit. So the first thing you want to think about it is failure of what, right? So we continuously confuse the failure of the venture with the failure of the entrepreneur. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the first problem. The second problem is all our numbers are nonsense, right? People will go around and go around telling you that 9 out of 10 ventures fail. Nonsense. 9 out of 10 ventures funded by VCs fail. And how many ventures do VCs actually fund? Even in the US, which has the largest VC industry, 1/100% of ventures. Even the ventures that go public, the really successful ventures, 70% of them get no outside formal funding. Okay, so what are we talking about by failures? Now, when you look at all ventures that have any employees, so not self employment, but we are not looking VC funded, we look at all ventures that have employees, about half of them are around 8 years or later. Of the half that are gone, a third are profitable at the time of exit. So all our numbers on these failure things are wrong. We are discouraging people for absolutely no reason. But here is the most important thing. What is the best prediction of success? How you deal with failure, right? Failures are a part of the process. So the expert entrepreneurs will tell you things like, what do you mean by failure? I fail all the time, right? There are daily failures. You're asking for things, people are rejecting you. You get a purchase order, you send out the product fails. There are 1,000 ways you learn to fail. It's part of the process. So what you really want to think about is that failures and successes happen all the time. What you want to learn is how to outlive failures and how to accumulate little successes and make them into a long success over time. So now I come to your question, which is absolutely important, which is how do I deal with failure? The first thing we have to teach our students is not to see failure as this horrible thing that somehow I'm going to go into trauma and, yeah, once in a while, very rarely, right? You have big failures. And every time you have a failure, even a small failure, it tastes bad in the mouth. It is difficult to deal with, right? So let's just actually expose ourselves to some failures and learn some coping mechanisms. And the most important lesson is that it's going to happen almost on a daily basis. And so that's really the way we have to teach. And the ask is a strong mechanism on that, because when you go out and talk to all kinds of random strangers, you have to get used to all kinds of weird responses out there. It's never, you're not, I tell my students that if you're just going to be a student in my class, you're going to be disappointed, because the no world is going to tell you this is correct, this is wrong. You got an A grade versus a B grade. It doesn't work that way. You're just going to go out there and there are going to be all kinds of weird experiences that happen, and you will figure out ways to outlive the difficult ones. You will figure out ways to connect and grow your co-creational network, the small successes into to a couple of great stakeholders, and you have everything going. So I tell them that, and this is useful even if you never start a venture, because life too literally brings failure to your doorstep in a variety of different ways. So does this answer? I know I'm getting a little too philosophical and getting on my soapbox here, but does that address your issue?
So what I heard, just to reiterate and make sure I'm understanding correctly, the affordable loss principle then references more about the investment required at that point in time to get going on day one, and the costs that you mentioned are lower. Are if it is psychological, it's because they've developed resilience through doing multiple things that they've had to deal with.
Yes, that's a great starting point. And now that I'm very glad you responded and told me what you understood. That allows me to tell you one or two more things to that, right? So the affordable loss is not only about money, right? It can also be time. right? I'm going to give it 6 months. And meanwhile, my spouse has to put up with my not being around for a lot of things, right? It involves things like reputation. It involves this issue of what happens if after 6 months of trying something, it doesn't work out, right? So let's say I leave my current job, I've convinced my spouse, give me 6 months to try this venture, right? And this is how it will be. And then at the end of 6 months, if the venture doesn't work out, you're going to come back on the job market. And that's going to be personally humiliating sometimes, right? So there are all these things. So affordable loss is not just about the money, it's about you facing the reality of what you can and cannot live with. And then you can push it a little further. You can say, okay, what would it feel like? So I have a colleague in Bangalore who came up with these exercises. And one of the exercises he came up with was, there are these people who make very good money as IT, information technology professionals, and they all have dreams of starting a company. And one of the things he said as preparation is, practice the affordable loss for the next 6 months before you leave your job. Assume you are earning only half what you are earning, right? So you cannot do the big fancy restaurants or fancy vacations with your family. Live at a lower level and see, can you live with it, right? So this is what I mean by literally practicing the downside as well. And same way, if you go out and ask people, even when you are not quite ready, you will learn a lot. I mean, you will actually fail a little bit, right? So you start testing the barriers and limits of what you can and cannot put up with from every angle, including psychological, emotional, and even more important, relational, right? People find the relational the most difficult, that how the family is going to get affected, all of those things. So we can teach all of that. People can practice. I even have spouses. I invite students to bring spouses to class or to dinners, things like that, because that support system is extraordinarily important. And we don't do enough on that front when we teach. So these are a couple of elaborations I have. Does that add to the understanding?
It does. Thank you. It almost sounds like it's almost the commitment of self. So
Yes.
exploring the extensions of that. So it's great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And committing to this, the idea that this process is going to involve failure, right? It's not about succeeding without failure. That is no such thing.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Is it Mayuk? I don't know.
Yes, Professor.
Yeah.
Yes, Professor. Professor, this might sound like a personal question, but I mean, you have personally faced multiple failures as a founder. Like one of your business was drowned in flood.
Oh, so you
my-
heard the Hidden Brain podcast, huh?
yeah. So what I want to understand is uh, how you reacted to that failure at that time, and now after so many years of entrepreneur research from the academia, if such thing happens again, how would you react to that? So
Great question.
would that change?
Great question. And how did I react? Badly is the simple answer to that. It took about 18 months to really figure out, but during those 18 months, I was still trying to get up every day and do stuff, right? And that much I had learned through prior disasters and prior ventures before the big disaster, right? And so, but still, when the difficult, I mean, failure always is difficult. There is no question about that. But as I said, since then, having so sort of my entrepreneurial career taught me that failure is part of venturing. But then as you become, I mean, by the time I'm on my fifth venture, I know that it's not the failure of the venture that is the problem. It's all these relational failures, right? But then one of the most important things I learned through the big one was that all kinds of people that you never thought would be there for you step up to the plate. They show up to your home and offer you help. It's just crazy. It's not only the people that you thought are in your network or who you think are your well-wishers, but a lot of other people, strangers, show up to help. So a lot of our this led me to think about not just the psychology of it, but also our fundamental assumptions about human behavior. This is why my PhD in behavioral economics made a huge difference, right? Because now we are really, it's not only about what we know about individual psychology, but all of us have assumptions about fundamental assumptions about human behavior. For example, we have this thing that most people, for the most part, will take advantage of you if you don't watch out, right? And maybe there are some people that we trust, but most people are going to not be trustworthy, or we don't even tell this to ourselves. It's not explicit. It's implicit. It's implicit in cultures, right? Inside the culture, it's not just attitude towards failure, it's also attitude towards trust. All of those things are there. And so the academic thing combined with my research over the years of how different levels, how, for example, what my students struggle with, my students in the US versus Germany versus India, right? What they struggle with on this front, about their assumptions about human behavior, but also how the culture sort of influences you without your even knowing it. And so I'm able to look at it novice level. I'm able to look at people who have just started one or two companies, are beginning to learn real lessons, and I have the data from the expert entrepreneurs, right? So when you look at all of that, I have a much clearer idea now. And this is also this is also why I tell people, like, learn to fail, right? The surest predictor of success for an entrepreneur is actually how you tackle all the negative things that get thrown at you. Not whether your market is large enough and stuff like that. That does not make any sense. So those are the lessons. And as the expert entrepreneur says, since so many of you seem to be interested in this topic, here is the soundbite, right? It's not failure versus success. It's failures and successes on a daily basis. And there are three rules about failure, right? Keep them small, kill them young, don't fail alone. There is something very powerful about not failing alone, because that is the strongest way and the quickest way you can come out of it, whether it is psychologically or financially or relationally.
Thanks, Professor. Thanks.
All right. So in the interest of time, I want to get us just to the entrepreneurial method, which is like just one slide with some animation on it. And then I'll just end the slide and we'll just have an open conversation. Shall we do that, Indu?
That works.
Because this is about effectuation, I cannot leave you without an effectual ask to you, right? So let me do that. Hold on 1 second. That's not what I wanted to do here. This is where navigating things on my laptop is more problematic than if I had my big monitor here, but that's life. Okay, it's restarting the whole presentation, which you do not want. And then I have to move you all here and there. I'm really sorry about this. I wish I had the monitor. It just works so much more efficiently than this. Sorry, and I'm rambling here. Okay, let me show this here. So here is going to be my setup for making an ask of you, which is really, let's think about what's next. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Ah, man. Sorry, I have to go it all in reverse here. I promised you that I would talk to you about the lean paper. So many of you probably teach some, lean startup. And this is a paper that was published in the Journal of Management very recently. And it looks at the CAVE framework. It goes into a lot of detail, including a case study and things like that. But then the main thing it does two things. One thing is it shows how anything that you use in teaching, all kinds of tools and all kinds of theories and instruments can all fit into this 2x2. So you can start here, trial and error, seeking help, things like that. And then you sort of move into customer development, prototyping, the market opportunity, lean startup hypothesis testing. And then you can either go traditional business planning, or you can build a business model canvas, and eventually you get to a pitch. But if you want to think about some of the psychological variables or design thinking, you can do all of that as well. And this is how it looked before we came up with the whole stream of work on effectuation. There was nothing in the bottom right. And then you saw there were some things happening along the bottom two quadrants, bricolage and acceptation. And then along comes effectuation. So this is explained in the paper. But the more important thing that's explained in the paper is this idea that now you can take the 2x2 and then make them into two triangles. And the upper triangle is the scientific method, right? That's why the lean startup is all based on hypothesis testing and things like that. The world is out there and the world is going to give you the answer. Whereas in the entrepreneurial method, there are some things that are out there, but we can reshape those things and build new things, right? That's the entrepreneurial method. And the scientific method only occupies the top triangle. It's about understanding nature. Whereas entrepreneurial method is about unleashing human nature. And this is where our assumptions about human behavior become very, very important. Because if we have the wrong assumptions, then we are not going to be able to use the potential, because we are so limited in thinking people are this way, people are that way, people cannot learn, and some people have the ability, some people don't, and all of those kinds of things. And then the other thing is scientific method can only help you achieve purposes. The scientific method doesn't teach you how to come up with a purpose that is worth achieving. Although there are overlaps, and I talk about it in the paper, looking at the history of science, the history of entrepreneurship, and the history of entrepreneurship in science. I look at that too. And so the entrepreneurial method is about co-creating new purposes worth achieving. So this is what is there in the lean and effectuation paper that came out in the Journal of Management. And then let's talk about what's next, which is really going to get us to the other paper that I promised you. So what's next is really to start think about teaching entrepreneurship to all, right? And this is the crew of the Inspiration 4 on SpaceX, right? Just ordinary people going into space. That's why I took that picture there. So it's teach entrepreneurship to all, the way we teach science. You can see that the entrepreneurial method is as large and as powerful as the scientific method, but we don't teach the entrepreneurial method at all. But in order to teach it to everybody, we'll have to start building some infrastructure. And this is a shout out to my colleague Gosha, who has been working with me on many things, and she really helps organizes for the Batten Institute, the entrepreneurship educators workshop that we do here. We have one set for next Friday, October 3rd. And Gosha also wrote these books for kids, right? This is like bedside reading for kids. And it's a series of 6 books called Mia and Tiago. So we really need to build content as well as teacher training right from there, right from really, like, we read books that talk about science and astronomy and things like that to kids. We can talk about entrepreneurship. So this is Gosha. Thank you, Gosha. All the way to complete teacher training and nationwide. So this is the paper that came out in Strategic Entrepreneurship Journal. And this is very, very exciting for me personally, because it took a very long time. So in 2005, Denmark decided to take the idea of the entrepreneurial method seriously, and they passed a reform requiring some entrepreneurship and innovation to be taught to all their students K through 12. It took a while to implement it. In 2008, they implemented it. But since then, year after year, we have wave after wave of data of every single child in Denmark. So when we say nationwide, we're not sampling, it's truly the entire population. And of course, when you look at, what how many students immediately after high school are starting companies, that's like really tiny to begin with, right? So we were looking for whether teaching them this early on, whether that makes a difference. turns out that it actually makes a difference. They do start more ventures, and we are not talking, we are talking about ventures that have revenues and at least one employee. So we're not talking about somebody just registering something as a company. These are real ventures. And we also found very interesting changes in the kind of courses they take in college, even if they're not starting a company, and the kind of career paths they choose, because now entrepreneurship has become a real option for them. And I don't mean real option in the sense of real options, but I mean an actual live option for students. So on all the dependent variables, we had significant positive effects. And this paper just came out. So very happy about that. And now I'm going to leave you with my ask, which is really, over the last 200 years, we have built the infrastructure to teach science, and we did the right thing. We don't teach science only to potential scientists. We teach science to everybody who has access to education. And if you look at the entrepreneurial method, it's as large, but we have done virtually nothing on this. So I'm hoping in the next 50 to 200 years, we will add education infrastructure on this. And so I want you all to ask yourself and to ask educational infrastructure in your institution and in your country this question: why do we ignore the large real estate we actually own, which is entrepreneurship or the entrepreneurial method? And then we have to live like parasites, just depending on money that somebody will give us, or our theories have to come from the scientific method, or our theories have to come from something weird in some psychology. We have the real estate. Why don't we go look in? We build our infrastructure, we build the entrepreneurial method, and then we can build entire ecologies of possibilities for ourselves, our students, and most importantly for the future of the worlds we live in. So this is what I want to keep up there and leave you to think about it. And I'm happy to take a question from Abhimanyu. What a lovely name. Perfect name for a question after this. Go for it, Abhimanyu.
Thank you, Professor Sara. So I teach entrepreneurship. So I've been teaching BSc students and biotech students. So one of the problems I'm facing in the classes, I try to motivate my students that they should opt for the entrepreneurship after they complete their graduation. But the science educators coming from that particular background, they negate my statements in the class that there's nothing for the entrepreneurship as a career path. So I wanted your opinion. If there's a student from a science background, how we can motivate him, because he's more oriented towards research part, and how we can change the mindset of the other educators, because it is negating our what we try to achieve in the future.
Absolutely, a great question, and it speaks to this issue right in front of us here, right? So the first thing you want to do is maybe you want to include some content, and this is going to sound like self-promotion, but there is a lot more you can do, because I suspect you have science background as well. You want to find stories of entrepreneurship in science, right? So in the lean and paper where I looked at the history, I actually talked about Kepler, right? So everybody thinks that science just happens and there was no entrepreneurship in science, but science could not work if the entrepreneurial method was not there. So Kepler, all his life, was theorizing about the motion of the planets around in the solar system, but he didn't have the data. Because he didn't have money. He was a poor guy compared to Tycho Brahe, who was a rich guy, and he was maintaining star charts, right, for years, and night after night after night for years. So he had all the data in the world. And Kepler has to get this data from Tycho, and they don't get along because Tycho likes to live large, right, eat, drink, be merry. And Kepler is very ascetic. He's almost a priest. And they don't get along. So you'll see all of these things, and what does it take? And you look at what happened, and I'm not going to finish the story. Go read the paper or look up the story. But first of all, is we really want people. So you want to be talking to the scientists about the scientific method and the entrepreneurial method. Use the cave framework, the 2x2. Ask them to think, ask them to ask questions, and ask them, why are they always just dependent on some government agency or something, or some pharmaceutical company for their funding? Ask them to think about, there are multiple, when you have this entire real estate here which you're not exploring, what kind of a scientist are you? Right? So challenge them. So make a session that is about discussing science and entrepreneurship, not getting them to start a company after class. So in fact, I would urge you, give up the idea. So when we teach science, we don't teach science to people saying, here's why you should become a scientist, like the moment you graduate, right? It all depends. Some of them are going to go become bankers. Who cares? What you really want to do is to get them to think, let them know that they, just like they love science, there are ways to love entrepreneurship as a method. Try it out for other things. Try it out for your career goals inside a research organization or inside a university or something. Let them just practice the effectual ask. And very quickly, they're going to think entrepreneurially, right? The next thing you want to tell them is that starting a venture is not the only way to become entrepreneurial, right? So you can think about working with somebody who is starting a company. And you can literally show up and you can be the self-selected stakeholder for them. So even if you're pursuing your research or doing other things, you have a hand, you are taking an option in some entrepreneurial ventures. That's another way for you to engage with entrepreneurship, engage with the ecosystem. So give them multiple pathways and don't try to, motivate them or pitch them. You also are going to use an effectual ask approach in your teaching. So you're inviting them in, and some of them will self-select. In the early stages, if you're teaching 30 people, 2 people may get excited. But the moment you have 2 people, bring them back to class the next year. And that is how everything changes, right? It takes a little time. Be patient. But by just simply our trying to motivate somebody to do something they don't want is the last strategy you should consider. What you really want is to motivate them to want to think about it. The scientists want to think scientifically. The artist wants to think artistically. Open the door and get them to think. So if I were teaching artists, I would do the same thing. I would talk about science, and then I would say, how does science work in art? How does entrepreneurship work in art? And let's talk about art, and you teach me about art, right? And you really want to do it if the teaching has to happen effectually. And open the door, get them to think seriously about the two through history, through examples, whatever. Get them engaged with actual entrepreneurs in small ways. So it just becomes that's the way we build an ecosystem of people who become capable of entrepreneurship, whether they actually start a venture or not. They will help all the other entrepreneurs and ventures out there, and that's good too.
Thank you, Professor Sara, for your insights.
All right. Any more questions?
If you have questions, you can unmute or raise a hand. We'll take the questions.
Is there nothing on chat? People tend to put a lot of stuff on chat.
There's one question on chat. Charlotta asked, like in Crazy Quilt, does this emphasize how the effectual ask plays out by co-creation conversations, like asking others, what do you think? Who do you know? How can we co-create?
I'm not sure what the question is in there. Absolutely, at the heart of the Crazy Quilt is the effectual ask. The effectual ask is the one that opens the door. So people come in with whatever pieces of fabric they have. And it is for you to start thinking about how to stitch that fabric together into something that's beautiful and keeps us warm, right? So you are always the person, the effectuator, whether they are the entrepreneur or whether they are some other stakeholder in the existing company, however you want to think about it. The idea of the effectual ask is you open the door and invite somebody in. And Crazy Quilt is what you have to do next when somebody actually walks in that door. If they are willing to do something with you, you have to think about how exactly the relationship will work, How will this new person walking in the door, how will they work with the people already in the room? All of those kinds of things. So the effectual is the heart of it, but there's a lot more than that. That's why I ended up writing a whole book. So today we didn't have time to go into all of that, but we do want to think about things like how do you structure the relationship, how do you maintain it over time, and people will come in and out of the crazy quilt. So sometimes you have to like remove a stitch and restitch it, and all of those things are part of the process. There's way more work, and I invite all of you not just to read the book or anything like that, more importantly, because I will be dead soon, I just want you all to take it up in your research, in your teaching. You have to build this crazy quilt and expand it as well, the intellectual one. So welcome to start doing that too. So how many minutes do we have, Indu? Because if we don't, if we have a couple of minutes and no questions, there is a video I'm happy to show just as an inspiration for people who are interested. But I just want to make sure I'm not, going over time
Go
here.
ahead, please show the video. Go ahead.
Okay, so the video I'm going to show you is the founder of Acumen Fund. Her name is Jackie Novogratz, and Jackie Novogratz is an alum of UVA, and she is talking about the two Rwandas. And I'm just thinking for a second, maybe since we have spent so much time on the ask, maybe the first thing I will show you, this is only a 90-second video, I believe, from Steve Jobs on failure and on asking. Since there were so many questions, that's the more appropriate one. And then I will show you the Jackie Novogratz one just as inspiration, because it also shows you how to think about like everybody being a pilot in their plane. So let me show the Steve Jobs one first, and then depending on time, we can do the Jackie Novogratz one, which is about 3 minutes. So the Steve Jobs one is only 90 seconds. So let me do that. Okay, I'm going to play this. Make sure, let me know if the sound doesn't come across or anything like that, Indu, okay? Yeah.
No, I've actually always found something to be very true, which is most people don't get those experiences because they never ask. I've never found anybody that didn't want to help me if I asked them for help. I always call them up. I called up, this will date me, but I called up Bill Hewlett when I was 12 years old, and he lived in Palo Alto. His number was still in the phone book. And he answered the phone himself. He said, yes? He said, hi, I'm Steve Jobs. I'm 12 years old. I'm a student in high school, and I want to build a frequency counter. And I was wondering if you had any spare parts I could have. And he laughed, and he gave me the spare parts to build this frequency counter, and he gave me a job that summer in Hewlett-Packard, working on the assembly line, putting nuts and bolts together on frequency counters. He got me a job in the place that built them. And I was in heaven. And I've never found anyone who said no or hung up the phone when I called. I just asked. And when people ask me, I try to be as responsive, to pay that debt of gratitude back. Most people never pick up the phone and call. Most people never ask. And that's what separates sometimes the people that do things from the people that just dream about them. You gotta act. And you've got to be willing to fail. You've got to be willing to crash and burn. With people on the phone, with starting a company, with whatever. If you're afraid of failing, you won't get very far.
All right. Let me go to the Jackie Novogratz. Okay, you don't want to be looking at every single video there. So let me just go to Jackie.
Kigali, Rwanda, 1986. I'm a 25-year-old former banker standing in a field of sunflowers on a bright, sunshiny day. And standing next to me is a bespectacled, apple-cheeked nun named Felicula. We're in that sunflower seed to dream of creating the country's first microfinance bank. And we're there to visit with oil pressing businesses, examples of the tiny kinds of ventures that our bank will fund. We'll call our enterprise Dutarembere. It means to go forward with enthusiasm, and all I see is upside. 2016, Kigali, Rwanda. Now I'm the 55-year-old CEO of a global organization named Acumen. It's night. The sky is midnight blue, and I'm standing speaking to President Kagame and his ministers, telling them about the launch we intend to do of a $70 million off-grid solar fund to bring clean, affordable electricity to 10 million low-income people across East Africa. Now I understand not just the upside, but the downside risks of what change are about, and yet still I'm confident that we'll pull this one off. Right before I get on stage to make my speech, a young woman in a Navy suit walks up to me and says, "Miss Novogratz, I think you knew my auntie." I said, "Really? What was her name?" Because so many of my friends had been killed in the genocide. And she said her name was Felicula. And all of a sudden my eyes welled with tears. I said, "You know, Felicula, I haven't heard her name in decades." And suddenly I was back again in that sunflower field, remembering the day that Felicula was murdered in a hit-and-run accident, really for daring to reject the status quo and standing for women's rights. That was the time I understood the high stakes of change. I said, "Who are you again?" And she said, "My name is Monique. I'm the Deputy General of the Central Bank." And if you had asked me in 1986, or any of my co-founders, when women had just gotten the right to open a bank account without their husband's signature, if you had said to us that in 30 years, we wouldn't just be improving women's economic condition, which was our mission, but that a young woman in the next generation would be running the financial system, and that Rwanda would have more women parliamentarians than any country on the planet, I'm not sure we would have believed you. Maybe our dreams were too small. And I understood in that moment that I was there back in that same place to be reminded that I, like all of you, stand on the shoulders of greats who came before. And that I was there simply to complete work that Felicula and women like her had started but could not complete in their lifetime. And that in this moment in history, it is to each of us to take on dreams that are so big, we can't complete them in our lifetime.
All right. That's all I have, folks. But I'm happy to stay if we have a minute, if there is another question or something. Otherwise, Indu, hopefully this has been what you had wanted me to accomplish in this time.
I think it was fantastic, and everyone would agree with that, right? This was an amazing session. I think, Saras, thank you so much. I really am taking that failure quote that you said. Keep them small, keep them young, and don't fail alone. I think that was really powerful. So that's what I am taking from this session. There are certain things that stay with you, and this was the most powerful one. But thank you so much. I hope we all enjoyed. It was an honor to host you, Saras. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming in. And our next event in the speaker series will be on November 14th with Herman Eguinness. And stay tuned for that. We will share the details soon on our social media platforms. Feel free to email me if you have any questions or ideas. If you want to bring Saras again, I'm definitely sure we want to hear more about the effectual ask from Saras. So we'll try bringing her back again. But thank you so much. Thank you, Saras. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Supriya.
Yeah, I can see that.
I am really